And there was a book at the time that she used to sing for me, which was the struggle, the fight in prose of two singers, with one person, literate person, who was a scholar, someone who studied literature, someone who was passionate and followed that type of literature, who was called Romado. And another character that was called Ignacio. So we had the one who was illiterate and the other one who was literate. And they turned this song into a challenge. And the one who knew how to speak in prose, in verse, won. More on the University of Cachimba, that is one of the fantastic characters in Brazilian literature. So they went to a public place, and at the time, and what my grandmother used to sing to me, they went to this public place, and the entire city went to see them. They wanted to hear them sing, and the rules were established for both singers, saying that they should talk about the things of Caatinga, the species of Caatinga, the plants, the insects, the animals, all the different things that existed there in that region. How? Well, since Ignacio was illiterate, if he were to stray away to a different situation, he didn't have a way of singing. So he started with a chant. He prepared the leaflet, and when the literate man who understood about literature saw that he had to sing and go against Ignacio, the illiterate person, he decided to breach the rules, and he started singing about the things that had to do with scientific language. And so he started talking about astronomy. And I can never forget that my grandmother used to sing, telling me the end of the story, when the illiterate person ended up winning, when Ignacio surrenders and then he loses the contest. And he said that he had changed the rules of the game, and he used to say the following: if this honor is the hammer, then since I saw the science when you saw that I couldn't deal with that, and it was a very sad situation, and I started crying, and my grandmother used to turn to me saying, see, my sweetie, he lost because he's illiterate, and that the story of an illiterate person was very painful. So inside me, I had a demystification. That's what happened inside me. Demystification. People might be very intelligent, but even if they are very intelligent, other people can beat them. Other very intelligent people can beat them if they're not honest and if they don't abide by the rules of the game. But if Ignacio would have known how to read and write, he would have won that contest. And so I say that also my wishes, besides the dream and the lack of many things, came out of that contact with literature, with poetry, in a way symbolizing some things, a few things that were very important for me at the time. When I turned 16, one day I decided to ask my father, who was very sick, that I wanted to go to the city, that I wanted to go and study because I wanted to heal my health. I wanted to become literate and to be a nun. And I cannot forget when that happened. We were together. We were working on porks. My father had some swine, some porks that we raised for our own food, for our subsistence activity. And I was closing up the porks at the time. And then I looked at my father and I said, I want to go to the city because I want to study. I want to become educated because I want to turn into a nun and look after my health. He looked at me, do you want to go now? Or do you want to go a week from now when we sell this rubber, and then you will get some money. I couldn't believe it that I was learning that lesson, which was the ability and the capacity that people have in trusting. Sometimes we don't trust our young people. We don't trust our children. We don't trust our young people. And by not having trust in them, we don't open up the doors so that they will have wings and fly or learn how to fly. He said, you have to fly because at the age of 17, you have to go to Ceará. You have to sell the rubber so that you can help us with the Second War. And he went to the forest dreaming that, in fact, he was a soldier that was helping us in winning the war. Maybe I learned with him. I learned from him that there are no limits for our dreams. Therefore, my father accepted, and then I went to the city. I traveled to the city. So the first thing I did was to look for a church and for a school, the church, so that I could ask the nuns that I wanted to join them because I wanted to become a nun. And then the school so that I could become literate, because beforehand I knew that I could not be illiterate. That was the idea that came to mind. Later on, I learned that there are illiterate nuns. I thought that all nuns were illiterate. But it was really good because I learned a lot. And then I joined a school for the first time in my life at the age of 16 and a half. A school known as Natalina do Silveira Brito in the area where I used to live. And the neighborhood was made up by people who came from Serendais, from the great houses that were destroyed by disasters. And these were unemployed people. They did not have access to health, education, basic sanitation. And that's where I went. So I started participating in a literacy course for adults that was organized at the time of the military dictatorship. They were not using our method from dear Priest Freire. It was a conventional system. They did not talk about the things that we knew. They did not appraise our symbolic universe. No value was given to it. It seemed that they were doing us a favor by teaching us the letters, but it was precisely because of that I joined that school, and for the first time a course had started in February 75, so I joined the course in September 75. And when I walked into the classroom, something very interesting happened. I saw the professor. It was the first time that I had seen that. And the professor was teaching already. They started in February, and I came in September. So she was teaching to these people, and she was teaching the sound of letters, how words are created. And I was listening to everything. I was paying attention to what she was saying. And then suddenly I thought of an idea, because I didn't know how to read or write, but I knew mathematics. I had learned mathematics so that I wouldn't be tricked when people came to buy a rubber, and many people were illiterate at the time, and so they were cheated and they were tricked with the weight and the price of the rubber. So my father had taught me mathematics so as not to be tricked. So when I walked into the classroom, I saw that she was speaking of letters only and creating words, putting letters together. And so I thought, oh, so this is it. This is what the whole thing is about. So what I have to do is learn the letters. I will learn the sound of the letters, and then I will add up the sound of the letters, and then I will create words. And so it was a mathematical equation that I created in my head, and I walked out of the classroom determined that I was going to create the sound of letters and learn the letters in order to create words. And I asked my cousin to use a piece of paper and write the ABC. And I don't know, I spent all night or until the next day decorating the letters and adding up the letters and creating words with the letters, learning the sounds. But 3 days later, I was able to read the words. And then I stayed there for 15 days, and the professor believed that I had to move on to another level. It was the first 4 levels of elementary education, and it was called integrated education at the time. We had 46 students in that classroom, and in the previous classroom, well, if you wanted to walk in, that was fine. Nobody checked who came in. But in this one, she asked for my name. She wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then I said, Marina da Silva. I gave her my name. And so when I was called She said, Marios Marina, and I rose and I went to the table because she called me first. She was not following the alphabetical order when she called, when we had the roll call. So I went to the table and I said, what are you going to do here? And she said, well, you called me. And she said, are you crazy? Are you crazy? When I call you, you simply have to say present. You don't have to come to the table of the teacher. It is simply roll call. And everybody was laughing just like you are doing now, smiling. They thought it was funny. Why? Because pedagogically it was not a good method. Because I was really ashamed when everybody started laughing. Everybody was laughing. And then I felt the need for crying, and I went to the last bench in the room, and I stayed there, and I thought, I'm never coming back here, because we were Indians, we were natives at the time, indigenous people before the partnership of the forest and the indigenous. They were the chosen amongst the chosen. They thought that we were lazy, that we were ugly, that we were illiterate, that we were ignorant. And that is the way they saw us. So I was really ashamed. But the next day I started thinking, should I go back to the classroom or not? Well, I have to study. I want to become a nun. I can't be illiterate. And so I stayed with that anxiety, that anguish, and I decided if I don't go, they're going to call me crazy for the rest of my life. So I came back and I lowered my head. I went to the last bench in the room and she said, Marios Marina, and I said, present. And everybody started laughing again. They said, now she learned what she has to do. And I have learned. Yes, I did. But at the end of the year, there was a test. And the only test, a formal test, the classroom was based on radio distance education. Brazilians here know that the project is called Minerva. And it was at the end of the year. So I promised that I had to pass that test with the primary education. Out of the 46 students, only 3 passed the test. And I was there as a part of those 3 with a grade of 5.5. And that is why I'm saying that I bear witness to everything, because it was an illiteracy program for adults. And out of 46 students, only 3 passed the test. It is very low percentage, very low, less than 10%, less than 10%. It was an awful program, so we cannot publicize such a program. One cannot advertise. We need literacy programs that work, and that first and foremost follow pedagogics that gives due value to the symbolic universe of the person who is taking the course. And we bring in another equation here. We are not part of this literate program. We have not been trained. We have not been educated, but we were part of informal processes, of informal education. And here in Brazil, we have Take 10 in informal education. The greatest symbol of everything is our president, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. He's the best example. He didn't go through formal processes, and he's a brilliant person, respected all over the world. Maybe someone who is measured by that, by formal education, well, you know what I mean. You know what happens? This happens with me in certain cases. Well, and moving right along, I know that I have very little time available. It was 30 minutes. It's not that 30 minutes is not enough, but I have four attributes that make me speak a lot. I'm a professor, I'm a woman, I'm a politician, and Latin American. What can you expect then? Then I have to speak within the time allotted for this speech. And moving right along, if on the one hand, if we have a huge deficit in the entire world of learning, of formal processes, of education, then we have an abundance of teachers. Of the Argentine Alicia Fernandez says we have a huge number of opportunities in the processes, in informal processes. This is a matter of using that knowledge, that structure, as Piaget, the great educator, says. as the bench and the anchor of the process itself, of the learning process for young people and adults, and thus have access to language, of the language of learning and teaching for these individuals.